Hi, Garnet and Neurolite Practical Guide for Beginners. I have now gone to page 3. Page 3 is the vector concept, at least at the top. Vector concept. The brain is always trying to convert noise to find a signal. It searches through noise to detect a signal. It's always trying to move from meaningless to meaningful. It's trying to go from nonsense to sense. So, understanding that, I have advice, and the advice is what I call a vector, meaning to work with a certain force in a certain direction. That, if you're a teacher and you have a subject, you would like it to move along so that it kind of makes sense. One thing leads to another, that you build on something instead of jumping around erratically up or down, left or right. And the student, using the teacher analogy, really is trying to get value from this, but has a hard time putting it together because it doesn't have a flow, it doesn't have a momentum or a movement in a certain direction towards a certain point or a certain understanding. So the vector concept is a way of getting better results with the Neurolite. It's a way of what I say sometimes, first things first, and one thing follows another. As you work with the vector concept, you'll see it kind of unfolding. And one of the very basic things in a vector concept goes back to some of these earlier basic concepts of capacity and demand. The tennis analogy, that there's a vector. You may want to be out there in the tennis court, but I have you in the gym. It may not be clear, at least in the beginning, but you'll notice that we are working into the process of you learning how to play tennis, even though you may not recognize it. Sometimes the vector starts at a fundamental level and then moves towards complexity because the person needs to be at the fundamental level for a while. So the vector concept is this idea of a kind of goal in mind and not trying to jump from now to the goal all at one time. I also sometimes say that the only person you can work with is the person now. You can't work in neuroplastic change with the person from the past or the person in the future. Right now is the only person that you've got. So the nows have to be kind of linked together. Later on, when we go further into the practical guide for beginners, you'll see some of the suggestions or the menus that I've created and why the choices are the way they are. There is a kind of sequencing that makes sense. And that sequencing, the decision to move incrementally, step by step towards a goal, is what I would call the vector concept. So it's a little bit abstract in the beginning, but when you begin to use the Neurolite and pay attention to some of these concepts, and also you begin to have an experience of what it's like to work with light sound signaling as a way of developing neuroplastic capacity and the demands and new skills, then you'll see, instead of jumping around here and there, one day I do this, next day I do that, if there's no kind of relationship, I guess maybe that's the key word, or one of the key words, is that when you do what you're doing, the should word, right? There should be a sense that one thing relates to the next, whether one thing builds on another, or one thing points to the next, or that you can assimilate one thing and then another. It's this idea of creating a relationship. And it doesn't have to be purely linear. It can move around. You can visit a country and not just go in a straight line. You can kind of go left and right, if you know what I mean. But as long as the theme, what I call here the vector, as long as the relationship theme has some kind of cohesion, then you're going to have a much, much better result. So I think you'll better understand the vector concept as you begin to work with the neurolight, as we explore, or you explore, not just in the guide here, but on your own or from other aspects of your own creative process, that you'll see. It's like, movie script or something, or like composing a symphony, or even a simple song. The idea of it moving in a set of relationships towards a particular goal is what I call the vector concept. So if you bump into it, if I say vector, or you recognize it in other aspects, that's what I mean. The relationship, moving towards a goal with some kind of reasonable, logical, relatable set of steps. Thanks.